Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, Preparing Unaccompanied Homeless Youth for the 25-26 FAFSA. As folks are logging on, we'll just give a few seconds so people can get connected to the audio. Just as a reminder, we are going to be sending a copy of this PowerPoint and the recording, so no worries there. Love seeing all the participants trickling in. And in the chat, if you want to let us know who you are, where you're coming from, what your role, that'd be super helpful for us to know kind of who's joining us today. So again, welcome to our session, Preparing Unaccompanied Homeless Youth for the 25-26 FAFSA. All right, welcome, Judy. Got some people coming in. Oh my goodness, they all start coming in all at the same time. A lot of folks all across the country. Welcome. We are going to continue getting started because we have a lot of information, but please keep in the chat writing who you are, where you're coming from, and your role. All right, so my name is Jillian Satar, and I'm the Director of Higher Education Partnerships at Schoolhouse Connection. If you aren't familiar with Schoolhouse Connection, we are a national organization based in DC with a mission to overcome homelessness through education. And we do this from prenatal up to post-secondary education. We provide practical assistance, so a lot of trainings, webinars such as these, as well as practical assistance and advocacy work on the federal and state level. So here's a little bit more about us and our newsletter. As you can tell, the chat is bumping. We're so happy to see that. We want to encourage folks to utilize the chat and let us know if you do something similar or if you have really great examples, let us know in the chat. And then for the Q&A, if you have any questions, please utilize the Q&A because we have some really great folks helping us. So special shout out to Jessica from John Burton Advocates for Youth and Jenny from Youth Law Center. They are going to be helping us in the background at answering questions. And then we'll be hearing in just a little bit from our executive director at Schoolhouse Connection, Barbara Duffield. And then we have a special guest liaison, Rosemary Peterson, who will be sharing some specific strategies to helping students fill out the FAFSA. And so today we got 75 minutes together, and these are our learning objectives. Number one, we want to make sure that we understand when we're talking about homelessness on the FAFSA, who are we specifically talking about? Who is eligible? And what are the responsibilities of McKinney-Vento liaisons to help students complete and fill out the FAFSA? We're going to summarize the homeless youth provisions from FAFSA Simplification Act. There are specific policies surrounding homelessness in the FAFSA that we want to make sure everyone is aware of and knows. And then lastly, again, we'll hear some strategies and tools for helping students fill out the FAFSA and prepare for post-secondary education, again, getting those determinations and helping advocate for students, both hearing from Rosemary, as well as some kind of general best practices we're hearing from across the country. And before I get started, again, just want to say you'll get a copy of this PowerPoint and the recording. Barbara, if you don't mind putting in the chat, we have a PDF version of this. So if you want to follow along, have the slides in front of you, totally fine. We will add that in the chat in just a second, and you'll get a copy of this webinar, recording, PowerPoint, and an evaluation in the next few days. Here's our roadmap for getting here in these next 75 minutes. We've done some introductions here in the chat. We'll talk about the importance of the FAFSA, look at some data, kind of get that ground setting and understanding before we do a little bit of a deeper dive. Looking at the specific responsibilities of our McKinney-Vento liaisons, our K-12 partners, our counselors, talk about the definitions, again, understanding when we're talking about homelessness on the FAFSA, who are we particularly talking about? FAFSA simplification policies, those that are specific to homeless youth, our partner spotlight with Rosemary, and with some general FAFSA best practices. And again, of course, resources and question and answers. We know y'all have a lot of questions. We're so happy to have people on our team on the background to be answering questions as they come in. But again, we'll have some time throughout the end to answer some questions live. So with that, I'll turn it over to Barbara.
Thank you very much, Jillian. Thanks everyone for being here. talk a little bit about what we know around higher education and youth who are experiencing homelessness. But first, this really basic question. I think it can be helpful when we're making the case for focusing on the FAFSA and higher education, particularly for students experiencing homelessness, and the thought maybe, well, that higher education may be less necessary. And particularly right now in our country, there's some cynicism, some skepticism about the value of higher education. But it remains true. And in fact, new research came out just this summer looking at where the jobs are being created by this economy, that 85% of good paying jobs will go to workers with some form of education and training beyond high school. So this is the future of our economy. We also know just the sheer mathematics in terms of the median earnings of those who have a bachelor degree are so much higher than those who complete high school. So from the perspective of not being homeless anymore, and really having a permanent pathway out, some kind of education beyond high school is necessary to get those good jobs. And we also know that higher education specifically is a protective factor against future homelessness. So we share this with you so you can share it with others as part of the case making for why this is so important. On the next slide, why the FAFSA? Well, youth who are experiencing homelessness really can't pursue higher education without financial aid, and the FAFSA is how you do that. We also know more generally that high school students who do complete the FAFSA are 84% more likely to enroll in higher education. So it's a necessary first step. We also know that some states now, an increasing number of states, are looking at universal FAFSA policies that actually require FAFSA completion as a requirement of graduation, with various, of course, opt-out policies. So another reason why we're so hyper laser-like focused on the FAFSA. What do we know about homelessness in higher education? Well, there was a National Center for Education Statistics report that came out, I believe, last year. It was 2019, so it was pre-pandemic. And that report found 1.5 million students were experiencing homelessness in higher education. Well, we know for sure, at least from our experience in K-12, that many students who are experiencing homelessness don't really get identified as homeless until they're completing the FAFSA. And we also know that unaccompanied youth who are experiencing homelessness may not even be counted in these statistics because they may be pushed into dependency overrides or other categories and not show up. So what do we know specifically about unaccompanied homeless youth and the FAFSA determinations? This just gives you a snapshot, again, from the U.S. Department of Education data from 2013 to the most recent year, of the number of unaccompanied homeless youth determinations that were made by school district homeless liaisons. There are others who can make these determinations. This just looks at that. And you can see when the requirement was put into McKinney-Vento for liaisons to affirmatively let youth know about their status and help them get the determinations, that those numbers went up. And then we saw with the pandemic, fewer students in school, lots of barriers, numbers started to go down, they're starting to go back up again. The next slide, which I think is really important too, is the Department of Education also provides information on applicants for the FAFSA who requested an unaccompanied homeless youth determination, but did not receive one. And we're very concerned about this category because these are young people who may have faced barriers, may have given up, may have been grilled for documentation they couldn't provide and then just gave up. We don't really know all the reasons, but nonetheless, a significant increase there. And again, one more disclaimer to say that we know from our own experience working with youth directly that many youth who are unaccompanied and homeless don't show up in these statistics because they end up having to go through very circuitous routes to get their financial aid. So real quick summary, this may be basic review for many of you. What are the legal responsibilities of school district homeless liaisons in the FAFSA? So first and foremost, as I mentioned before, school district liaisons are required to inform unaccompanied homeless youth of their status as an independent on the FAFSA and to help them get the documentation of that. That went in the law in 2015. So you have to proactively identify all students experiencing homelessness, and for unaccompanied youth, let them know about their status and help them get the requirements. There's also the broader requirement in McKinney-Vento to train all school staff about homelessness, and particularly we know students who are unaccompanied and homeless who may fly under the radar. So they need to be trained, and they also need to know how to connect back to the liaison. There are broader requirements in McKinney-Vento that I think sometimes don't get quite as much attention. For example, there's a requirement that homeless youth be able to receive assistance from school counselors to advise, prepare, and improve their readiness for college. So school counselors are key allies for homeless liaisons. Again, we've mentioned that unaccompanied homeless youth will need a determination that means they can provide to get their independent student verified. And we also know that liaisons will have to rely on other school staff to help students who are homeless complete the FAFSA. So school counselors are very critical partners, as are college access programs like TRIO, Gear Up, etc. What is somewhat new for some of you, if you've been around for a while, and may not be new because you may not have been doing this for a while, is under the FAFSA Simplification Act, homeless liaisons for many years have been able to make that determination. They're an authorized entity to determine that a youth is an unaccompanied homeless youth for the purposes of financial aid. Now the law says liaisons and their designees. So liaisons are now able to designate other people to provide those homeless youth determinations. That's going to make trainings like this that much more important. We at Schoolhouse Connection, and by we I mean Jillian, created a referral form to help ease the process between liaisons and who they designate when it comes to those homeless youth determinations, because we have seen snags where the financial aid administrator will come back and say, well, you're not the liaison, but they may be the person designated by the liaison. So this is a tool for you as you think about who is going to be the designee of the liaison to help provide those homeless youth determinations. Quick review of homeless definitions for those of you who are in McKinney-Vento, and for those of you who may be new. The definition of homelessness in the Higher Education Act is the same definition as for K-12 schools. So it is the McKinney-Vento education subtitle definition that includes staying with other people temporarily due to loss of housing, economic hardship, similar reason, that doubled up category, motels, hotels, trailer parks, or camping grounds due to lack of adequate alternative accommodations, of course, shelters, emergency shelters, transitional, other situations that people more typically think about as homeless in terms of cars, bus stations, encampments. And also important to think about in the higher education context, federal guidance has said that if you're living in a residence hall or dorm, but you otherwise would have nowhere else to go, you would meet the definition of homelessness. And last piece before I turn it over to Jillian is specifically our last two pieces, I think. When we're talking about the FAFSA, the policies for students who are homeless but with their parents are the same as for other students. But the unique policies really come in for youth who are homeless and on their own, unaccompanied homeless youth. And that definition, so there's a definition of homelessness and also not being in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. That's the definition of unaccompanied. And we have research, a lot of research on the right-hand side that really shows the abuse, neglect, family dysfunction, conflict that lead to youth being homeless on their own. Some of the very same reasons that young people are in foster care, and a lot of shared similarities and a lot of experience going back and forth between foster care and homelessness. So it's a population that has a lot of vulnerabilities and a lot of risks. And then lastly, just to sort of finish up here, where this all comes together for independent student status. If a student is an independent student, it means that they don't need parental income or signature on their FAFSA. They can complete it on their own. So for the FAFSA, you are considered an independent student if you have been determined to be an unaccompanied homeless youth or an unaccompanied youth who is self-supporting and at risk of homelessness. So that's something that's not in McKinney-Vento, but is in the Higher Education Act. And we have definitions here that say specifically, again, unaccompanied and homeless are the McKinney-Vento definitions, and then federal guidance explains more about what it means to be self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. So that is verbatim from the federal guidance there. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Jillian, and she will go over the provisions about unaccompanied homeless youth and the FAFSA specifically.
All right, thank you so much, Barbara, for sharing that little heads up and giving that refresher for some folks. So in case folks are not aware, the FAFSA Simplification Act was signed in 2020, and there were so many changes with the FAFSA. I mean, y'all know what happened last year, but there were some specific changes for homeless and foster youth, and those went into effect in the 2023-2024 FAFSA. The Department of Education released guidance in April of 2023, as well as a few months ago of July of 2024, which really reinstated and said, these homeless and foster provisions are in effect now, and we have specific instructions to financial aid administrators. Because again, there were so many changes with the FAFSA, maybe folks were unaware about the specific policies around homeless and foster youth. They might have gotten overlooked. So we're really thankful and happy that there's this guidance from the Department of Education, which states that these provisions are in place. Again, last year, 24-25 cycle year was really unique. It was really challenging, and there were a lot of issues. Number one, there was a big delay. Normally, the FAFSA is available on October 1st, but it was pushed to the end of December. And honestly, it really wasn't working fully until about mid-January. There were a lot of glitches. A lot of students didn't have access to the form, or the form wasn't working for them. There was miscommunication from the Department of Education, especially for our students experiencing homelessness. They received a lot of information from the Department of Education that wasn't supposed to be sent to them. And just, again, a lot of delays getting the form, delays the form getting to the schools processing the form. It was really tough for the last year. And we know that a lot of students, financial aid administrators, liaisons themselves expressed a lot of frustration. And, we are fully prepared for this 25-26 FAFSA. We are hoping that it will be a smoother transition. And this is what we know so far. So number one, the FAFSA is going to be rolled out in phases. Actually, the first beta testing happened yesterday. Some students started being able to see the 25-26 FAFSA through beta testing yesterday. And there's going to be multiple rounds of this beta testing throughout the month of October and November. So schools, community-based organizations, other folks could opt in to do this beta testing early. However, the full form will be available to students on December 1st, 2024. So again, a delay, but we're hoping that delay, when the form is available, it is fully available with all kinks figured out because we did this extensive beta testing. Fingers crossed. But Schools Connection, we were invited to meet with the Department of Education multiple times. We had a listening session with them and provided recommendations for this 25-26 school FAFSA cycle. And we submitted our public comments, which you will get a copy of this PowerPoint, both in the chat and an email. And you can read through what we were advocating for our changes for 25-26. Again, we're really hopeful that these changes were made to the 25-26 FAFSA to simplify the process and make sure that it is inclusive for our students experiencing homelessness, our students who are in the foster care system. And we are kind of excited to see, we have seen a little bit of some changes within the FAFSA demo site, which I will show the screenshots in a little bit. But continuing on, things that we know about the 25-26 FAFSA so far, things that we can be doing right now is number one, if you are in the high school working with our seniors, help students and parents create FSA IDs. This is the username that students and parents will need to fill out the FAFSA. And just as a reminder, as Barbara mentioned, if a student is experiencing homelessness with their family, they will fill out the FAFSA as instructed, including parent information, including parent signature. And that means the parent would also need to create an FSA ID and include their information. So that is that extra step that we want to make sure that parents are aware of as well. Another key piece that we want to make sure that we are doing is number one, identifying our unaccompanied homeless youth and providing determinations for our students. We don't want our students to get December 1st, fill out the FAFSA, and they're waiting for a piece of paper or a written statement or something from a liaison. And that's that one thing that's keeping them from getting a delay from getting their FAFSA. So these are some small steps that we can be taking proactively until the FAFSA will be fully available on December 1st for all students. Key pieces that we want to just highlight, while this presentation is solely focused, particularly on our students experiencing homelessness, we want to understand that there are intersecting identities between populations. So number one, students who are documented but have parents who are undocumented and don't have a social security number can also still fill out the FAFSA. There's a really great resource from the President's Alliance for Mixed Status Families that kind of walks through that process. So I definitely encourage you to utilize that resource if you work with the specific population of students who are documented, but have parents who are undocumented. And again, we recognize that there is a lot of concern and fear for these families, filling out a federal form stating that you are an undocumented person. So we recognize that there is that fear, and we are encouraging the Department of Education to provide more guidance to ensure that students and families feel safe providing this information. And then, as I just said, there are many intersecting identities, and students can be independent for other reasons in addition to be an unaccompanied homeless youth. So maybe they are part of the foster care system, maybe they have dependents, maybe they are over 24 years old. So these individuals can have multiple buckets, fit in these multiple buckets, click these multiple boxes, and be an independent student. So that is just something to be mindful that there are many other reasons why a student can be an independent student. Experiencing homelessness on your own is not the only reason why. And that we know that that can get a little bit confusing at times due to the change in skip logic or the lack of skip logic that happened with the new FAFSA. So before we get started here, we just want to do a quick poll, and I'm going to put that in just a second. Let me launch this poll here. I am curious, before we get into the nitty-gritty, what are folks' level of familiarity with the homeless FAFSA policies? So this will really help us understand, how in detail, how in depth we need to go in these presentations. And we have a plethora of resources on our website that walks through all of these pieces, but I'll give just a few more seconds here to see. All right, and just a reminder again, if you have questions, please put it in the Q&A, not in the chat, just so we have everything in one section, so we can clearly see what those questions are and respond to them in a timely fashion and at the end. All right, we're almost at a quarter, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. All right. Okay. Really cool kind of to see the bell curve. We got some people that said, 13% not at all familiar, no knowledge of homeless FAFSA policies. Great. This is exactly where you want to be. Get this training here. About a quarter, slightly familiar. You've heard that there were these homeless FAFSA policies, but don't know the details. Large chunk, somewhat familiar. You understand the basic concepts, but lack in-depth knowledge. And then again, almost a quarter, moderately familiar, have a good understanding about what they are and how they work. And then we have a few people very familiar. We have good understanding about homeless FAFSA policies and can explain them confidently. If you are part of that group, please fill out our survey. Let us know what you're doing, because we always want to know some really great best practices. And if you are partnering with financial aid administrators or other community partners, please fill out our evaluation or share in the chat what you're doing, because we love finding those partnerships. Awesome. Okay, let me continue on here. Going into the homeless FAFSA policies. All right, as I am presenting this information, if you're like, okay, I thought we've been doing this already. And again, these have been policies since 2023 FAFSA. So this should be what is happening, what we're seeing happening on the ground. But the 24-25 FAFSA was really challenging. We know there were a lot of issues that happened. So just want to preface, these things should be happening. Number one is about presumed independence. So once a student has been identified as an unaccompanied homeless youth or a former foster youth, they will be presumed to be an independent student for every year that they are filling out the FAFSA if they're at the same institution. We have heard that students who are going to be renewing their FAFSA hopefully will get their question carried over and pre-populated into the 25-26 FAFSA. we know that there's some new technology that's been going on, so that might not necessarily be the case this year, but what should be happening and what should be happening is that once a student has been identified, they don't need to provide a determination every year they're filling out the FAFSA. In the past, when students filled out the FAFSA, they needed to provide a determination, which either was a form or a documented phone call stating that they meet this definition of an unaccompanied homeless youth. It was at times taxing and re-traumatizing and re-triggering for students having to get this documentation, getting this paper, getting this documented phone call. And it also prolonged the whole experience because, again, students were waiting for this documentation. Moving forward, that is not the case. Once a student has been identified, they would continue with an independent student status and do not need to provide any additional documentation. Schools may ask and confirm, just checking, has your situation changed? But that is it. There's no other documentation that should be needed by institutions for students who have been already identified as an unaccompanied homeless youth or former foster youth. So if you're in a high school, this is going to help a student so much for their remainder of their time while they're in college, because they only need to go through this process once to be identified as an unaccompanied homeless youth or a former foster youth. And we just got these questions. They're hot off the press from the FAFSA demo site. This is what the question will look like on the FAFSA for a student, the homeless question on the 25-26 FAFSA. This will pop up and it will ask, at any time on or after July 1st, 2024, was a student unaccompanied and either homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? So really exciting to see, again, this question. It's a very clear, do you meet this definition on or after July 1st? And in just a second, you'll see the second part of the question. But just wanted to show you, this is what the question looks like for the 25-26 FAFSA that will be available in December for all students. Key policy number 2, determinations must be made as quickly as possible and no later than 60 days after enrollment. So this is more applicable for our financial aid administrators, for our folks on the college side. This is really ensuring that we are prioritizing our students who are experiencing homelessness, and we're making sure that they're getting their determinations as quickly as possible. We had one student, one of our scholars, this was years ago, but she filled out the FAFSA on October 1st. She did everything that she was supposed to, but then she had to wait for the financial aid administrator to get her determination. And it took 4 months for the financial aid administrator to process her FAFSA and get that determination. And it gave her a lot of stress. It gave her a lot of anxiety. But now moving forward, there is a clear expectation. It is literally in the law now. It says determinations must be made as quickly as possible and no later than 60 days after enrollment. And for our K-12 friends, our McKinney-Vento liaisons, this is just, a good practice to have just in mind, getting our determinations for our students as quickly as possible. So again, they aren't waiting for your determination in order for them to fill out their FAFSA and get that processed. So really great to see this key policy number 2. Number 3, key policy number 3 are more programs and officials are authorized to verify unaccompanied homeless youth. So Barbara kind of talked about this a little bit already, but school district liaisons or their designee, again, that or their designee is new. That could be a school counselor, a social worker, other folks in the high school staff. They can provide a determination for unaccompanied homeless youth. A second group of people that can provide a determination are our directors or designee of an emergency or transitional shelter, street outreach program, homeless youth drop-in center, or other programs serving individuals experiencing homelessness. This broadens so many people. In the past, it was very specific. It was just if your program was funded by HUD or an RHYA shelter, and that really limited the amount of places that could provide a determination. Because number one, oftentimes our students weren't going to shelters. They didn't necessarily feel the most safe being there. But if they were there, they definitely weren't asking, hey, by the way, what is your funding source? Like that is not a question that our students would ever think to ask. And now they don't need to, because once a student has been in any sort of program, any sort of shelter, those individuals can now provide a determination. I also want to highlight this last point that other programs serving individuals who are experiencing homelessness, this includes some of our friends in colleges and universities that have the role of a homeless higher education liaison, or we're hearing these homeless higher education liaisons, they mimic the role of the McKinney-Vento liaison on the K-12 system, but they are on the post-secondary side. So some states have this as a policy, California, Tennessee, we have a list of states on our website, Maryland as well. But other institutions just know that this is a best practice and have a designated homeless higher education liaison. For example, all 64 SUNY institutions have designated homeless higher education liaisons. And we actually just did a presentation to our SUNY liaisons on Monday. And I think I saw a SUNY liaison in the chat. So happy to have you here for a nice refresher, going a deeper dive into the FAFSA. So really happy to see that we have more folks coming from K-12, coming from higher ed, coming from our community partners to provide determinations for our students. And that's not all. We got more. We have TRIO and Gear Up directors. These are now another group of people that are authorized entities to provide determinations for our students. We know that there's a lot of overlap between our populations. Some of our students experiencing homelessness might be in these TRIO Gear Up programs. So now these individuals can provide determinations for our unaccompanied homeless youth. And then lastly, financial aid administrators at another institution who previously made a determination in the same or prior award year. So this is really applicable for our transfer students. We know sometimes our students might transfer. Oh, I think I'm getting, okay. Students might transfer from one school to another school. So stick with me as I run through this scenario. Say a student is at a community college. They had a determination from their McKinney-Vento liaison. The financial aid administrator at the community college said, yep, you have a determination, correct, confirming you're an independent student because you have this determination. Now that student transfers to a four-year institution. The four-year institution is saying, all right, we're looking at your FAFSA. The student is being presumed independent because, again, remember key policy number 1, but when they reach out to say, all right, where is this determination? Who do I look to? Financial aid administrator at community college, at school number 1, they can tell financial aid administrator at four-year institution, I have a determination, so therefore accept my determination from the previous determination. And again, it doesn't matter who's making the determination, just know that financial aid administrators at any institution, if it follows the student, it follows the independence status follows with them, as well as their determination. All right. And we have a sample form on our website that this is what a determination can look like. It is easy as just this document stating that on or after July 1st, and we'll update this to say July 2024, so it's applicable for the 25-26 FAFSA. And you just write your name, you check the boxes. And again, for our school district designees, we made a new section for you here where you write that you're a school district liaison or designee of the liaison. And if you're a designee, write the name of your school district liaison here. So then the financial aid administrator knows that you were designated. So we wanted to make this really easy for our McKinney-Vento liaisons, for the designees, keep everything on one page. And this, again, is a Google Doc. It's one of our most downloaded resources. And there are instructions on the first few pages of our website that are on the doc that shares how you can make a download of the form or make a copy of the form. So no need to request editing access. You can just make your own copy. All right. And here's the second part of the question on the FAFSA. So again, if you say, you'll see that did on or after July 1st, 2024, was a student unaccompanied homeless youth? That question. If you say yes to that question, this next question will automatically pop up and say, did any of the following determine the student was homeless or at risk of being homeless? and it lists all those authorized entities I just ran through. If you are in high school, you'd be clicking this box. If you are a homeless higher education liaison, you would be clicking this box. So let's say we're clicking this box, we'd hit continue, and then this would pop up and say, based on your answers, you're an independent student. This means you don't need to answer questions about your parents to complete your FAFSA. Perfect. This is what we want to see. Very easy. That is the process for our unaccompanied homeless youth who have a determination. Let's continue with our key policies here. So financial aid administrators must accept documentation from authorized entities for homeless youth. So all these people that I just talked about, financial aid administrators must accept documentation from all of those people on key change slide number 3, unless there's some sort of conflicting information. And documentation from an authorized entity can be a documented phone call. It can be a written statement, just like that form I just showed. And once a student has received a documented determination from one of those authorized entities, the financial aid administrator, the institution, must not request any additional documentation, proof, or statements unless there's conflicting information. We have heard and have seen some horror stories from some of our students that in addition to providing a determination, sometimes they need to get something notarized. Sometimes they need to write like a 2-page essay explaining why they are not living or talking with their parents and explained their abuse. And it is really egregious and not necessary. And honestly, it's right now it's against the law. This is what's in the law now. And we are really want to make sure our financial aid administrators and our institutions are aware that by adding these additional barriers, adding this additional documentation, that might be one thing that makes a student decide, I'm not going to go to college anymore, because they have to do or have to fill out one more thing in addition to filling out the FAFSA. Now let's talk through financial aid administrators. Let's talk through a process where students don't have an authorized entity. They didn't get identified in high school. They didn't get, there's no TRIO, there's no shelter. What would happen? It is in the law now that financial aid administrators must make determinations for unaccompanied homeless youth who are unable to get determinations from any of those authorized entities. These determinations must be based on a written statement or a documented interview that confirms a student, and again, meeting the definition of an unaccompanied homeless youth or unaccompanied at risk and self-supporting. And again, going back to what Barbara presented before, we're looking at the legal definitions of homelessness pulled from McKinney-Vento, and they must be made independently for the reasons why a student is an unaccompanied homeless youth. So as I like to say, the focus should be on if and not the why a student is in this situation. And thinking back to that line graph, the second line graph, there were so many students who requested a determination but did not receive it. And we imagine it's because this process can be confusing. And it really shouldn't be. Financial aid administrators, it is your responsibility. You are required to make this determination for our students who are requesting it. So going back to the scenario, say a student says, yes, they meet the definition, but they go back and say, I don't have an authorized entity. So they would click none of these apply. When we hit continue, hot off the press, we just saw this in the demo site, this new screen pops up and it states provisionally independent or unaccompanied homeless youth. This is where we're at, unaccompanied homeless youth. Based on your answers, you can submit your application without answering questions about your parents. Continue on, continue on. If you have indicated that you are an unaccompanied and either homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless, the financial aid at your school is required to make a determination of your status based on a written statement from or a documented interview. Please contact your school's financial aid office to complete the process. This is exactly what we want to see. We did not see this for the 24-25 FAFSA. This is new and we're seeing it on the demo site. So we're very hopeful we'll see this on the real 25-26 FAFSA. But really great to see this change. All right, I'm going to run through really quickly kind of another like offshoot scenario that we kind of get, there's some confusion with, so we want to address it. Sometimes there are students who are independent, but they're not homeless and they're not foster care. These students will submit their FAFSA indicating that they have unusual circumstances. Maybe it's parent incarceration, maybe they're estranged from their parents, and the financial aid administrator will complete a dependency override. It is important to note that unaccompanied homeless youth and former foster youth and dependency override are two different distinct processes. Dependency overrides are on a case-by-case basis, and financial aid administrators use their professional judgment. Unaccompanied homeless youth determinations use the process I just outlined in the law. Sometimes students might not know that they meet the definition of homelessness. Maybe the reason why they have these unusual circumstances, there's a root issue, and that student actually is an unaccompanied homeless youth. There just might be stigma associated with the word homeless, or you might realize that the student actually has foster care history. So it's always important to kind of ask these probing questions if a student is saying they can't provide parent information. And we're seeing that in this question right here. So if you say no to the homeless question, this question pops up, this unusual circumstance question. Do unusual circumstances prevent the student from contacting their parent, or contacting the parent pose a risk to the student? And you see a few examples of what they list, what an unusual circumstance can be. And as you're reading this, you might be like, whoa, those are the exact same reasons that Barbara talked about why a student can be an unaccompanied homeless youth. And you're correct, which is why there's a statement here that said, if the student's circumstances resulted in not having a safe and stable place to live, they may be considered a homeless youth and should review the answer to the previous question about being unaccompanied homeless. So the FAFSA is already rerouting you to go that route as an unaccompanied homeless youth to go through that process, because it is more streamlined and you're not using professional judgment, a dependency override with a financial aid administrator. So with all that being said, when you answer yes to that question, that same screen pops up, but then you would go through the route as a provisionally independent student. It's kind of similar, but they're different, distinct processes. But what we really want to make sure everyone knows, provisional independence does not equal unaccompanied homeless youth. They are not the same policies. All right, I just talked a lot. And before we transition to our next speaker that will be popping up in just a little bit, I want to make sure we have Rosemary here. I'm curious if folks in the chat want to share what their experience was helping unaccompanied homeless youth fill out the FAFSA. So let us know in the chat, and we are going to get ready to have our partner spotlight, Rosemary, join us. So I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Rosemary. All right, Rosemary, we just need to, perfect.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, I had technical difficulties last minute. My computer froze, so I'm using my phone, of course. I'm really sorry. First, I'd like to say thanks so much for inviting me. I'm really excited about the opportunity. So my name's Rosemary Peterson. I'm the Marysville School District McKinney-Vento Graduation Success Liaison. My role is to build relationships with unaccompanied homeless youth. And I do that by meeting their basic needs, identifying and removing barriers, and helping them stay on track to graduate on time. In addition, I give them hope for their future by removing barriers and helping them access post-secondary education training and apprenticeship programs. This includes ensuring they have their identifying documents, especially their Social Security card, because you need your Social Security number to complete FAFSA, and also their unaccompanied youth determination letter. I work with students in the system with attaining their FAFSA ID and completing FAFSA, and following up with them to confirm that their application is complete. That can sometimes be really challenging and discouraging for students when they just can't seem to get confirmation, or they need to do something differently. I also work with our college and career counselors and community partners like College Success Foundation to help them help students complete college scholarships and applications. There's a few scholarships I help with, but not many, because I'd like to focus on just doing the FAFSA and connecting them to colleges. And that's the next thing. I connect students to local colleges and provide support over the summer to prevent summer melt and give them the support they need to actually make it to college. A lot of our kids are really excited, but if they don't have that encouragement over the summer, they can just kind of fall off the radar and not access the college that's available. When I started in this position, I learned about the Washington State Passport to Careers program. And that helps Washington students who've been in foster care or experienced unaccompanied homelessness to prepare for college and careers. We have 45 colleges in Washington State, including our local community college, that participate in the program. Because of this, I reached out to our local community college passport program and scheduled an appointment to find out more about the program. That was back in 2019. And I went there to find out how the students actually benefit, how to determine the best way to connect students and the best way that we can collaborate. And what started out as an email that I would send to the designee and the student to connect them has gradually turned into a field trip to the college, support for students over the summer to prevent that summer melt, and accompanying students to their first advising appointment at the college with the passport team. What's new this year is that the passport staff has said that they're willing to come to our schools and meet with students one-on-one or in groups. And that is really important because we're not allowed to drive students. So we have to get really creative in ways that we meet them there or give them a bus pass. Fortunately, Passport is also willing to assist with the transportation piece and help students who are not on a bus route access Uber and things like that. So helping students fill out their FAFSA comes with challenges. First, students not being identified as unaccompanied and being identified after FAFSA is completed or just before graduation. I had situations where College Success Foundation has been incredible in supporting students, but they weren't familiar with McKinney-Vento, and they didn't realize that students who weren't living with parents were unaccompanied. So I was scrambling last minute to meet with students and get their FAFSA revised and give them their unaccompanied youth verification letters like a week before graduation. It was a little bit stressful. But the other thing would be staff and students not knowing that unaccompanied youth can complete FAFSA without parent information. There's lots of students that just give up on college because they think that they can't complete FAFSA. So it's really important to try to get to all the seniors early in the year as possible. And that's another thing. Homeless unaccompanied youth have to qualify their senior year. So it's really important the beginning of the year to tell them that that's possible. I don't like telling kids when they're sophomores or juniors about it because they may not qualify. And I don't want to give them hope for something that is not going to be available. The next challenge that I face is students not having their Social Security number. I again try to start as early in the school year as possible to ensure that students have everything they need to complete FAFSA. And this can start as early as, well, when I meet with students as early as 9th, 10th grade, I check to make sure that they have their identifying documents because that's just important, period. And I think that that's one of the resources that Schoolhouse Connection has a really great one-pager on that if you're not familiar with, you should be. The other challenge I face is technology. Of course, we know everything that happened last year. Hopefully that won't happen again. But I think it's important that we set ourselves and our students up for success when we're going to complete FAFSA. We need to make sure that students have a cell phone with service because you've got to do the two-step authentication, which can be very frustrating. They need a personal email and they need encouragement on a safe place to keep their FAFSA ID and passwords. I stress that because I've had kids that, oh, I know it, and then they don't, and it takes extra time to get that past that barrier. The process to fill out FAFSA can take a long time and there can be glitches. So having students out of class for extended periods can be difficult and they tend to lack stamina and get discouraged. Be okay with completing FAFSA at another meeting and follow up with the student to get that done. Most states don't have a program like Passport that I described. So I reached out to my partners at our local community college. Shout out to Everett Community College. for tips on ways for liaisons in other states to collaborate with colleges. And here's what they shared. They said that those who work in social and human services are at or above capacity at all times. It's no different than those working in higher education. And that our students, they don't always follow up as they should. So it's important that we offer support and assistance, but don't overwhelm them. Higher education services being at capacity need us to persist and advocate respectfully. Sometimes they need reminders, and we should not be afraid of that. They said not everyone goes the extra mile, so don't give up if you don't get a response. Pivot and reach out to a different department or organization. Outreach offices are a good place to start. Reaching out to vice presidents or deans of student services, diversity and equity centers, and any grant programs that work with workforce, food benefits, or DSHS. Another good resource, the Federal TRIO program has programs like Upward Bound and student support services throughout United States. So you can go to their website, check out what they have close to you. And lastly, connect with any homeless youth or foster services in your actual community to see if they have any connections at the college. And then here's some helpful tips when working with unaccompanied homeless youth. Persist and advocate for students and don't let barriers get in the way. As an example, our local Social Security office changed their policy this last year that they would only give replacement cards to people with appointments. They wouldn't accept walk-ins. But in order to make an appointment, you had to have your Social Security number, which was a huge barrier. And so I had to call 3 or 4 times before I was able to speak to a supervisor who was able to change their policy to make exceptions for unaccompanied youth. And I partner with our local youth shelter. They have advocates that work with the students to drive them to their appointment. But most of you probably know if a student doesn't have their identification card or their birth certificate or their social security card, it's really hard to get any of them. So yeah, I'm really glad I got that changed. It was a game changer. Anyways, reach out to liaisons working in surrounding districts to collaborate and problem solve. We have a quarterly community of practice meeting in our region where we have guest speakers and there's time for collaboration between McKinney-Vento liaisons. And if you don't have something like this, I would suggest trying to start one. It's been very beneficial. We share resources. And for instance, the Social Security office, others were having the same problem. So as soon as I got it resolved, I was able to email, and other people were having students go in and get their Social Security cards. Another thing is to give students their determination letter on paper, by email, and flash drive. Schoolhouse Connection is where I read about that. Thank you. And then get familiar with the grants and scholarship in your area and collaborate with your college and career counselors. And find out if the college or other community resources help with housing. Our Passport program, which I know is unique to us, is pretty incredible because between the Passport scholarship and the Pell and the Washington College grant, as well as College Bound, our students are able to access college classes at no cost, pay for their books and most of their housing. So they're getting a place to stay and their education, which is just incredible. And then, of course, utilize Schoolhouse Connection. Sign up for the emails and newsletters. They're always timely and relevant, and I've learned so much from them. It's allowed me to help unaccompanied homeless youth access college and training and lead to careers that give them an independent and stable future.
Oh,
that's it.
Amazing, Rosemary. Thank you so much for sharing that. You're getting a lot of love. I don't know if you could see on the phone, but a lot of hearts, a lot of applause. So just thank you so much. Again, if you have questions for Rosemary, put it in the Q&A because we'll have some time to ask her questions directly. But again, I'm just so grateful and thankful for all the work that you're doing. Just, I know that the dedication, reaching out to the Social Security office, getting those changes, that small piece is going to impact so many students moving forward. So thank you. Continue putting your questions in your Q&A and we'll get right back to our presentation. Let me get my desktop back up with sharing the slides. And a lot of the things Rosemary said, that's the same thing, you know, I'm including here, but just so we have like that refresher, what we're seeing across the country. Number one, helping students create an FSA ID. That is the most important thing we can be doing right now to prepare for the FAFSA when it becomes available. It can take up to 3 days for the FSA ID to be active. So again, we would hate for December 1st to come around and people are flooding the FSA ID website trying to create this when this all could have been done beforehand. We will update our email template shortly so that you can just copy and paste this email, letting students know what the changes are for 25-26 and what they need to prepare for filling out the FAFSA. Again, identify our unaccompanied homeless youth and give them determinations as soon as possible. Check your state and college priority deadlines. Some states and some colleges pushed theirs back last year because of the delay. So I'm not sure if that's going to happen again. Sometimes the date is around February or March or April, but definitely check to see what your state or your institution's priority deadline is so students know when to fill out their FAFSA so they can get the most amount of aid available to them. We also want to make sure let students know to fill out the FAFSA as soon as they can so that they, could get the most amount of aid, but also remind them that they need to fill it out every single year that they plan to go to college. Students are sometimes surprised when they learn that. They think it's like when you apply to college, you just kind of apply and then that just follows with you. That is not the case. They need to do it every single year. We have seen really great institutions, kind of similar to Rosemary's role, but having graduation coaches, FAFSA mentors, and helping students prepare for life after college, whether it's the 3 big E's, employment, enlisting into the military, or enrollment, just having some sort of plan and having that dedicated support and resource available. Partnering with local colleges or doing financial aid nights, really great way to establish building a relationship with a local college if you are a feeder high school sending students to a college. It's really awesome to see Rosemary talk about her relationship with Everett College. And, right now everyone is working through 25-26. How about you host host a financial aid night so students can get to meet other prospective students, they get to meet financial aid staff, they get to meet other folks at the college. So a really great way to help ease that transition. And if you aren't able to do a financial aid night, just encouraging students to call the financial aid office and build that rapport, build that relationship, especially if the student is accompanied. So again, experiencing homelessness with their family, because they would not answer yes to the homeless question. But there might be extra aid, there might be extra support. Maybe the institution has a homeless higher education liaison that the financial aid administrator can connect the student to. So the student knows that there is another person that's in their corner that is there to help them, that can mimic the McKinney-Vento liaison they had throughout high school. Provide devices. Rosemary talked about this as well, but ensuring that students have access to laptops, hotspots, a phone number so that they can do the 2-step verification, which Schoolhouse Connection, we have some thoughts about that, and you can read more about that in our public comments because it just has that added barrier for our students having that 2-step verification. So are there other ways we can work around within the FAFSA to make it easier to remove, to alleviate any sort of challenges that our students face? Scholarships, another great opportunity to help students pay for college is seeing what scholarships that are available. Schoolhouse Connection has a scholarship. The cycle isn't out just yet, but keep in mind if you're connected with us through our newsletter, through social media, we definitely do a huge blast out once the scholarship is out and available. And then letting students know about SAT and ACT waivers. That is another thing our homeless youth are able to receive. And I know we got a lot of questions coming in the Q&A, so I'm going to give folks just a few more minutes to write our questions in before I start answering some of them live. But as we are getting our questions and answers typed out, I just want to end with our key takeaways to make sure we know we're all on the same page. Get those determinations to our students as soon as possible and have them fill out the FAFSA as soon as they're able to. Start helping them create an FSID right now if you are filling out the FAFSA for the first time. Provisional independence and unaccompanied homeless youth, they are not the same, shouldn't be going through the same process. And then 3, ensure that we're providing services and resources to help remove any sort of barriers for our students. We have some really amazing resources on our website. Thank you, Rosemary, for the shout outs. Our FAFSA page, our sample form, I believe Barbara put that in the chat, but again, you'll get a copy of all of these resources, these slides, in an email soon. The federal education guidance from the Department of Education from July. This is our Bible. This is what we use for everything when we're helping students advocate for themselves, or we're using it to educate and inform financial aid administrators, letting them know about the law, letting them know about the guidance. And again, our partners, John Burton Advocates for Youth and Youth Law Center, if you have particular questions or need resources for former foster youth, that is the place to go. And if you want a little bit more in depth about designating liaisons or liaisons making designees, we did a webinar in May that you can watch this archived webinar to kind of see what that process can look like. And then we walk through the referral form. So definitely check that out. And lastly, it's going to start playing the webinar. Oh my goodness. Ways to connect with us. Oh goodness, everything is coming undone here. We had opportunities for ways to connect with us, and I'm going to put it up in, here it is. Here's our slide. Ways to connect with us. And then lastly, our contact information. So a lot of information. We have some time here. I am going to look through some questions that y'all asked, and we'll go from there. So let me see. Here we go. All right. If a student is determined homeless by a public high school liaison, can a university make their own determination and say they are not homeless? Well, if you recall, in the policies, a financial aid administrator must accept a determination from any of those authorized entities unless there is conflicting information. So no, a university can't make their own determination and say the student isn't homeless if they have already provided a determination, unless there is some sort of conflicting information. And I can give an example of what conflicting information can look like. So we had one student who was living with their older brother. The brother was like 20 years older. The student was an unaccompanied homeless youth, but was not aware that they were an unaccompanied homeless youth. She filled out her FAFSA and included her brother's information as her father, because he basically was a father figure to her. And then once the student was, and she filled out the FAFSA like that. As she was talking to a counselor, she realized she actually meets the definition of an unaccompanied homeless youth. So then she received a determination and then needed to reach back out to the school and let them know. The school was a little concerned and confused because she had put, her brother's contact information, but they didn't know that it was her brother. And then there was this determination letter with unaccompanied homeless youth. So that was conflicting information. It was confusing. And once the student explained the situation to the financial aid administrator, they ended up accepting the determination and was able to process and change things. So we really want to make sure that before the FAFSA is filled out, we want to make sure it's filled out correctly, because it's a little bit harder to make those changes, make corrections when it's already filled out and submitted. So that's why we really want to educate and make sure students know that they meet this definition, and the authorized entities are aware as well. So hopefully that answers the question. I don't know if any of my other co-presenters on the background want to chime in with that question. Feel free to unmute if you do, but I'll keep on going here. Okay. All right. So we have here at the university and college level, who should the students go to for helping getting their FAFSA letters? So this is, again, if you have a homeless higher education liaison, that would be the first step for a student to go to, because they are considered in other programs serving individuals experiencing homelessness. However, if a student is unable, does not have a homeless higher education liaison, it then falls on the responsibility of the financial aid administrator to make a determination as outlined by the law. So there are definitely people on campus, and we want to make sure financial aid administrators are going through the process outlined in the law as an unaccompanied homeless youth and not exercising professional judgment. They are not doing a dependency override. Unaccompanied homeless youth determinations are their own distinct process. Okay. How do students fill out the FAFSA in subsequent years? So for example, if they move out of dorms into a house with roommates, they might not be considering experiencing homelessness or unaccompanied homelessness, but if they don't check it, then they would ask information about parents. I'm going to take a quick sip of water, but in the meantime, I'm wondering, Barbara, do you mind answering this question if you don't mind? You might have stepped out, so talking a long time, everyone. Oh my goodness. Okay, so going back to what the FAFSA is, there's that question that pops up on or after July 1st of that year. So for 25-26, we're looking at on or after July 1st, 2024. So that is something we need to think about immediately. We're looking at that particular date. And if the student meets that definition on or after July 1st of that particular date, that's what we need to look at their living situation. So say the student has an unaccompanied homeless youth. They were an independent student their first year. Their second year, they're now stably housed. They're living with housemates. They are on the lease. They have a job. They're paying for it. They are stably housed here. If they are not, they would no longer be on or after July 1st of then be 2025 for 26-27. So they would not answer yes to the homelessness question. If they aren't in contact with their parents because there's unusual circumstances, then they would answer yes to that unusual circumstance and not need to provide parent information because they have an unusual circumstance. So that is one scenario. But say if the student is back, living with their parents, then it really depends kind of like what the situation is. I'm kind of going based on the example that you said here. So if a student is stably housed, but still can't provide information about their parents due to a variety of reasons, then yes, they can go through the route of provisional independence. So it just kind of varies, and there's a little bit of gray area. Barbara, is there anything else you want to add there?
No, just to apologize. I was answering somebody else's questions. I didn't mean to leave you in the lurch, but let me answer somebody else's question so you can catch your breath. Which there was another question. Can students qualify who become homeless over the summer after they graduated? Yes. So remember, the age for independent students is 24 and under. So once you're 24 and over, you're considered an independent student. But when we're talking about these provisions for unaccompanied youth experiencing homelessness, it's if they were homeless, basically under age 24. So yes, homeless over the summer, homeless in your first year of college, homeless in your second year of college, as long as they meet the definition of unaccompanied and homeless and youth, which is 24 and under, then they qualify, or of course, unaccompanied, self-supporting, and at risk of homelessness, which is trickier. And there were some questions about that as well in the question pane. What does it mean to be at risk? What does it mean to be self-serving or self-supporting? The Department of Education's guidance is kind of vague. Self-supporting just means you're paying for your own living expenses, including housing. At risk of homelessness, they say when your housing may cease to become fixed, regular, or adequate, for example, eviction. I think probably there's a case to be made that it's a little bit broader than that, but just a little bit more information about that timing of homelessness. And hopefully, Jillian, that helps you. Take a breath.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm getting so For folks who have the FAFSA determination form, again, there are instructions on the form that share how to make a copy or how to download the form. I get notifications every time someone tries to edit it, and you don't need my permission to edit it. We want you to make a copy or to download the form yourself directly so you can edit it yourself. Rosemary, this is for you. Is there any possible way, if you don't mind sharing the information that you were sharing out, if you have that written down somewhere, and if you want to contact Rosemary, her information is here on the slide, but this person said you had really innovative ideas and she'd love to know more about the support. So Rosemary, is it possible for you to send me anything if you had things written out?
Yes, absolutely. I'm in the process of doing that. I'm working off of my phone, my cell phone, so it's very hard for me to answer questions. I apologize. But yes, and you got my email. I'm happy to have that.
Perfect. Yeah. Her email's up here as well as Barbara's. And then again, our friends, Jenny and Jessica, if you have specific foster care questions, that is there. All right. Continuing on with a few questions. Let's see here. For FAFSA independent student status, are we supposed to know the student social security number? So yes, that's the process that Rosemary was talking about. The student should know their social security number, and when you should be reaching out with the student, having them fill out that form. It should also hopefully be in the the student information system that you have at your institution. But yes, that it'd be important to know. Right. Let's see. There's a Pennsylvania specific question. It sounds like that got answered. The homeless liaisons are listed by school district. Is there a similar for higher education homeless liaisons? So there is, again, by state, it kind of varies. Some states have homeless higher education liaisons. Not all states do, though. We are working on federal policy, which would require all states to have that. So if you are interested in learning more, come check out our website. Unfortunately, in Pennsylvania, there isn't specific homeless higher education liaisons. There are foster youth. There is a foster education tuition waiver program. So that is something to be mindful of. All right, another question here. Someone said they have a student who moved out of her father's home due to abuse and is now living at the community college dorms because she is in dual enrollment. Can this person qualify her as an unaccompanied homeless youth and help her fill out the FAFSA for next year to transfer at a four-year college? I'm going to assume this person who wrote this is a liaison or community liaison or a designee. Yes, that is definitely 100%. You should qualify her as an unaccompanied homeless youth, help her fill out the FAFSA so then she can transfer to a four-year institution. This was on a slide earlier, but we know sometimes students, when they are at college, there's a live-on requirement. I used to work in housing and residential living. And so if a student has to live on campus for their first year or the first 3 years, if a student has no place to go during the winter break or during the summer break, that student still is an unaccompanied homeless youth. Just because they are physically in the residence halls or physically in the dorms, that doesn't mean that they aren't an unaccompanied homeless youth, that they aren't homeless. They just have that space during that point of time. But during winter break, during summer break, if they have nowhere to go, then they still qualify and are an unaccompanied homeless youth. We had a lot of questions, and we will be compiling all the questions out, and we'll send an email to you all. It'll take us a few days, maybe a few weeks, to compile all the questions and all the answers. But I just want to thank you so much for spending time on this Wednesday to talk about the FAFSA. Huge thank you to Rosemary for sharing all the work that she's doing to help her students in Washington. And again, thank you so much, Jenny and Jessica, for working behind the scenes, typing furiously. We're so happy to have you all as partners and just your expertise and your knowledge. If you have any questions, reach out to us. Please fill out our evaluation. Again, we love identifying really strong examples and partnerships. So thank you all so much for tuning in, and stay tuned. Good luck with the 25-26 FAFSA. Thank you all.